Certainly.
Here's Section 1 expanded to meet the 700-word requirement. ##### Section 1. First contact and first impressions. The Threxian observation station hovered silently in high orbit above Earth, a sleek, dark metallic sphere glinting against the backdrop of the distant stars. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the Threxians had long prided themselves on their civilization's calculated precision, their advanced technologies, and their ability to predict the behavior of countless species. But Earth, the blue and green planet teeming with life, had proven to be a baffling anomaly. We've observed for several years, yet we still do not understand them, Threxian analyst Velkai muttered, frustration leaking through his usually composed voice. His long, thin fingers hovered over the hollow table, bringing up more footage of humans engaged in seemingly senseless activities. A human holding a wrench, striking a creature many times its size with what appeared to be a blunt tool. Another group of humans huddled around a table, tossing dice and laughing, while one human used an object, a chair, no less, to block an incoming projectile. Velkai could not fathom how these creatures, so primitive in appearance, could show such impressive resilience and resourcefulness. Perhaps they are less logical than we first thought, suggested another analyst, Zoratel, her mandibles clicking thoughtfully as she scanned through more data. Perhaps they are not a threat. But Velkai was not so quick to dismiss the humans. His eyes narrowed, focusing on the image of the chair-wielding human.
No.
There is something more here, he muttered, turning to the main data feed. Everything they do, everything they have, is turned into a weapon. They seem to thrive on it. He tapped a button, pulling up more examples. Humans crafting primitive tools out of nearly anything they could find, transforming everyday objects into lethal devices. A human soldier in a war zone had been filmed using a metal pipe as a spear. In another clip, a group of humans had fended off an entire raiding party of alien invaders with nothing but household cleaning supplies and improvised explosives. There were stories of human resistance fighters who had turned civilian-grade machinery into deadly war machines, dismantling alien technology with nothing but their ingenuity. Their minds are not bound by the limits of what their species has developed, Velkai said slowly. No, it's something more organic, more dangerous. Zoratel looked at him, her spindly antennae twitching. You believe them to be unpredictable? Unpredictable? No, he replied. I believe they understand a fundamental truth we have overlooked. They can use anything. Anything. It was then that Velkai recalled an incident that had occurred several cycles ago, an Earth-based skirmish between human forces and a more technologically advanced species. The attackers had far superior weaponry, shields that could repel any form of projectile, and technology designed to disarm their enemies. And yet, in the span of mere hours, the humans had managed to overpower the invaders, not with the force of their weapons, but with their ability to improvise, to use anything within arm's reach to dismantle the attackers' technology. Look at their history, Velkai said, his voice taking on a more analytical tone. Thousands of years ago, they took something as simple as a plow and turned it into a tool of war. In the Great War, they adapted their vehicles, their technology, even their own bodies, to fight off invaders. Zoratel stared at him, her silvery eyes wide. We never considered the potential of their creativity. No, Zoratel. That's what makes them dangerous, Velkai muttered. Their greatest weapon is not their technology. It's the way they think, the way they adapt. They can take a hammer, a stone, or even a simple piece of cloth, and turn it into something lethal. As the Threxians continued to examine the data, they noted more and more instances of human creativity being used for survival. There were reports of humans surviving impossible situations with nothing more than sheer determination and the will to make the most out of the barest of resources. From lone humans trapped in hostile environments improvising shelter and weapons, to groups of individuals using simple tools to organize resistance movements, humans never seemed to stop thinking. It was this particular trait that unsettled the Threxian Council. They had encountered species before, advanced species that had incredible technology and weapons, species that ruled planets and subjugated their enemies with ease. But never had they encountered a species so adaptable. A species that could, at any moment, turn a seemingly useless object into a deadly weapon. The Threxians had come to Earth in the hopes of studying the humans, of deciding whether they were ready for integration into galactic society. But the more they observed, the more they realized the humans were a species of survivalists, and that made them unpredictable. What was once thought of as primitive savagery, the humans' seemingly chaotic and wild behavior, was actually a survival mechanism, an evolutionary tool that allowed them to thrive in environments that would otherwise have been their demise. There is no consistency with them, Velkai admitted as he sifted through the vast quantities of data on the human species. They are not bound by our laws, our rules, or our technologies. They create their own reality. Whatever they want, they find a way to make it happen. Zoratel's tone was one of awe, mixed with a growing fear. And they have not just survived, they have thrived. Velkai paused, staring at the data in front of him. His mind raced. If this was the true nature of humanity, then the decision the Threxian Council had to make would be far more complicated than they had initially thought. "We must observe further," he said, his voice steady, but full of uncertainty. "We need to understand their limits if they have any. Perhaps there is a way to neutralize this unpredictable force before they can become a true galactic threat." Zoratel nodded, but her unease mirrored Velkai's. The truth was clear to both of them now. If humanity could weaponize anything, absolutely anything, then there was no telling what they might do once they were fully aware of the scope of their potential. This section establishes the tone for the story, emphasizing the alien race's growing fear and respect for humanity's ability to adapt, using ordinary objects as weapons. It sets the stage for the Threxians' decision to engage with humanity and the impending tension over what to do with such a formidable, yet unpredictable, species. Absolutely. Here's Section 2, the human specimen, expanded to meet the 700-word minimum. Section 2, the human specimen. They chose their subject with care. His profile was unassuming. Mark Teller, age 36, former infantry-turned-civilian mechanic, currently living a quiet life in a rural area of Oregon. He was not a soldier anymore, not a scientist, nor anyone of high rank or notoriety. To the Threxians, that made him the perfect candidate, a control sample. If even a non-combatant human proved formidable under the right conditions, their theories would be confirmed. "He is ideal," Velkai had said during the final selection meeting. "No weapons. No training in recent years. Alone. This will be clean." And so they came for him. The abduction was swift, surgical, and quiet. Mark was walking home from the local gas station, a bag of chips in hand, when a column of shimmering blue light enveloped him. In the span of a breath, he was gone. He awoke in a sterile room. Cold, dimly lit, metallic. It didn't feel like a hospital. It felt like a prison. He sat up slowly, taking stock of the space. No furniture beyond the slab of metal he'd been lying on. No obvious doors, just seamless walls that seemed to pulse with a faint energy. There was a humming in the air, mechanical, rhythmic, almost alive. His head pounded, his thoughts scrambled. But his instincts, those were razor-sharp. Something's not right. From behind a transparent panel, the Threxian observation team watched, recording his vitals and analyzing his behavior. They noted his calmness. Most abductees panicked, screamed, thrashed. But Mark had only blinked, adjusted to the light, and immediately began scanning the room. "See how he maps the space," Zoratel observed. "He's calculating. He already knows this is not Earth-based tech." "No signs of emotional collapse," Velkai added. "Interesting. We expected more distress." Inside the cell, Mark pressed a hand to the wall, felt the slight vibration. He crouched down, tapping the floor lightly with his knuckles. Solid, dense alloy, something between titanium and ceramic. Probably too strong to break through without tools. Which, of course, he didn't have. Or did he? Mark sat cross-legged and emptied his pockets. Loose change. A keyring. His shoelaces. The foil bag of chips. "Let's see what we've got," he muttered to himself. Within 2 hours, alarms began to sound. The human had pried a panel loose with the keyring and used the metal edge to short a minor circuit in the wall. Not critical systems, but enough to gain access to the adjacent storage bay when the internal failsafes kicked in. Surveillance drones rushed to intercept, only to be blinded by the powdered chip dust blown directly into their visual sensors. He weaponized snack food, Zoratel whispered in disbelief. The human was on the move. Mark moved quickly, ducking between alien consoles and crates of unknown equipment. His shirt was torn, now knotted into a makeshift sling holding a shard of metal he'd sharpened on a wall edge. His shoelaces had been twisted into a snare that currently disabled a patrol drone in the hallway behind him. He didn't know where he was, but he knew what he was doing. He remembered the training. He remembered the mindset. Improvise. Adapt. Overcome. Asterisk. And most importantly, never stop moving. Contain him, barked Velkai. He is unarmed. He has no weapons. He is the weapon. Zoratel snapped. The internal security system deployed non-lethal stun nets. Mark avoided them with terrifying precision, yanking a power conduit from a wall and using the exposed wire to short out 2 net launchers. Then came the more sophisticated deterrents, electromagnetic pulse fields, sonic stunners, even neurodisruptors meant to incapacitate. Mark used a piece of the drone he'd disabled earlier to reflect the neurobeam back into its emitter, causing it to short-circuit and explode. By hour 4, the ship was in partial lockdown. The Threxian crew had retreated to control stations, watching in horror as the single human turned their cutting-edge vessel into a playground of chaos. He was sealing off corridors behind him, leaving improvised tripwires, setting distractions with blinking lights and smoke from burning insulation foam. But the most disturbing part wasn't the sabotage. It was the smile. The cameras caught it. The human, crouched behind a bulkhead, grinning to himself as if enjoying the challenge. There was no fear in his eyes. Only calculation. Determination. A quiet sort of glee that sent chills through the Threxian analysts. This isn't survival, Velkai murmured. This is sport. Eventually, Mark reached what he guessed was the engine core. It pulsed with raw energy, alien inscriptions running along the walls. He didn't understand the tech, but he recognized fuel lines, coolant coils, power regulators. He could feel where it was vulnerable. He didn't need to destroy it, just threaten to. A security field slammed down around him, trapping him in a containment dome. For the first time, Mark stood still. The intercom buzzed. A voice, alien and filtered, asked in halting English, "Why do you do this?" He looked up at the camera, sweat dripping from his brow, shirt stained with grease and soot. "You took me," he said calmly. "I'm just trying to get home." "You made weapons from trash," the voice said. "Why?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "Because I had to." In the control room, no one spoke for a long time. Velkai turned to Zoratel. "We captured him unarmed, isolated, and surrounded. He turned our ship against us in hours. He turned nothing into a weapon." "No," Velkai said grimly. "He turned himself into one." "Would you like to continue with Section 3 next?" "Absolutely. Here's Section 3. The galactic response, expanded to meet the 700-word minimum. Hashtag Section 3. The galactic response. The news of the humans' escape spread quickly, rippling through the halls of the Galactic Council, carried by messengers, whispered by those who had access to the encrypted transmissions. The Threxians had never been this unsettled by a species, certainly not by one so seemingly primitive. If the reports were true, if the human truly did weaponize their environment with nothing but sheer will and ingenuity, then it was a development that could change everything. The enlightened vigil, the observation ship still hovering over Earth, had become the center of an unexpected crisis. The abduction had been a controlled test, meant to measure the strength of a single human. It had been a simple experiment, or so they thought. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare scenario for the Threxian Council strategists. The Threxians' response was immediate and divided. The Galactic Council convened in an emergency session, an unprecedented meeting with representatives from all the major species, including the Cyrash Dominion, the Salthor Republic, and the Vexian Consulate. Each of these factions had their own agenda, their own interests in the human race. Some feared the implications of a species capable of adapting so quickly. Others saw an opportunity to turn the humans into an asset, a tool, a resource. The council chamber was filled with tension, a chaotic buzz of multiple voices rising to a crescendo as representatives made their case. "We cannot ignore the facts," a Cyrash general declared. "This human, this Mark Teller, was taken unarmed and untrained. Yet he turned a Threxian warship into a trap. It is not merely a matter of survival instinct. This is calculated. He had no concern for his own life, only for his ability to destroy everything around him." He turned to face the Threxian delegation. "How did you fail to contain him?" Velkai, standing at the front of the Threxian delegation, replied through gritted teeth. "We underestimated them. We saw them as primitive, impulsive, unable to think beyond their physical limitations. We were wrong. A human can make anything into a weapon." An unsettling silence fell over the room. "Should we destroy them?" the representative from the Salthor Republic asked, her long, tendril-like arms folded across her chest. "If this is what they can do with one individual, imagine what they might accomplish with even a handful of them. I suggest we annihilate them before they learn how to threaten us." The room erupted in protest. "Destroy them?" a Vexian diplomat barked, his multicolored scales glimmering in the light. "Are you insane? The potential for cooperation with humans is immense. They are resourceful, adaptable. They would make excellent partners in trade, exploration, or warfare. We can harness their ingenuity for our benefit." The debate was intense, with voices clashing from every side. A certain faction, the Federation of Sylar, suggested a more measured approach, focusing on integration and study, though even they had reservations. After all, if a human could outwit a species as powerful as the Threxians, what would stop them from doing the same to anyone else? What would stop them from sabotaging the delicate balance of galactic peace? In the middle of the bickering, the Council's chief diplomat, an ancient being known only as Zral, called for order. He was a creature of pure energy, his presence enough to quiet the room with a single pulse. "Enough!" Zral's voice resonated through the chamber, the sound vibrating with authority. "We will not destroy them. We will not treat them as enemies. That would be a mistake, one that we would regret. But we must also recognize that these humans are a threat, not because of their numbers, but because of their creativity. The very thing that allows them to thrive is the thing that makes them dangerous. To underestimate them further is folly." The room was silent. Even the most hardened strategists understood the truth in Zral's words. "We must act quickly, decisively," Zral continued. "A new approach is needed. We will not destroy them, but we will contain them. We must be ready for any eventuality. Let us test them, not with brute force, but by understanding them. Let us learn from them. And let us prepare for the possibility that they may turn against us." Velkai nodded grimly. "It has already begun. We will begin monitoring their every move. We will learn their strategies, their culture, their technology. We will adapt to their methods." "But how can we predict them?" the Salthor representative asked. "We cannot anticipate their every move. They don't think in linear patterns. Their unpredictability is their greatest weapon." Zral's energy signature pulsed with quiet amusement. "Perhaps that is their greatest strength, but it can also be their greatest weakness. If we understand them, if we learn how they think, we can predict how they will react." The debate raged on for hours, but the consensus was clear. Humanity had to be contained, studied, controlled, and watched. The council members, though wary, recognized that there was no other option. If humanity was allowed to continue unchecked, they might just outgrow the entire galaxy, becoming a force no one could control. Before the meeting adjourned, Zral issued one final order. "We will send an envoy to Earth. A small team of researchers, scientists, and diplomats. They will offer humanity an alliance. The goal is not to bring them to heel, but to gain their trust. Let them think we are their equals, but we will watch them, we will understand them, and we will never, under any circumstances, allow them to rise beyond what we can control. And thus, the mission was set in motion. A covert team would be dispatched, and Earth would be the next battlefield. Not of weapons, but of ideas, alliances, and the strange, unpredictable mind of a species that turned everything into a weapon. Would you like to move forward with Section 4 next? Absolutely. Here's Section 4, the rising threat, expanded to meet the 700-word minimum. Hashtag Section 4, the rising threat. The first contact was not what the Threxians expected. Their envoy, a sophisticated delegation of researchers, diplomats, and analysts, was dispatched under the guise of a peaceful mission. They arrived on Earth, cloaked in the most advanced stealth technology available, and initially, their presence went undetected. They thought they had control of the situation, watching, observing, gathering intelligence. Yet, they hadn't anticipated the sheer speed at which humans adapted to their presence. The Threxians, for all their power and intelligence, failed to understand one fundamental truth about humans: they never stop learning. When the Threxian ships first appeared in Earth's atmosphere, the humans did what they did best. They responded quickly. In moments, they were scrambling fighter jets, tracking the strange, uninvited visitors on their radar. But rather than acting aggressively, the humans fell back on something deeper: their curiosity. The United Nations, the planet's highest governing body, convened an emergency session. Initially, the Threxians' attempt at peaceful diplomacy was met with cautious optimism, as representatives across the globe began to speculate on the nature of the alien visitors. However, as the hours wore on, the humanities scientific community began their own investigations, analyzing the technology used by the Threxians. They didn't just study the ships, they hacked into them. Professor Elaine Foster, a world-renowned computer scientist, led a team of the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Within hours of the Threxian delegation's arrival, they had already cracked into the external communication systems of the alien vessels. They were not sure how it worked, but they knew one thing for certain: these Threxians were not invulnerable. "Look at this," Elaine said, pointing to a screen filled with alien code. "This is alien software. But it's flawed. Look at this buffer overflow error right here. It's a design oversight." One of her colleagues, a young coder named Adam, blinked in disbelief. "You're telling me we just hacked an alien ship? With human code?" "Yes," she said with a smile, a mixture of wonder and concern on her face. "And we're not just reading their systems, we're controlling them. I can make their defensive drones change course. I can access their data feeds. This isn't a fluke. It's just the way their tech works. Or rather, the way it doesn't work." "Do you realize what this means?" Adam asked, his voice trembling. "We've just cracked their technology. Asterisk in our star." Elaine's expression darkened. "Yes. And we need to be very careful. If they find out we can do this, we may not be able to stop them from retaliating." But it was too late. The Threxians knew that something was wrong the moment their systems started malfunctioning. Sensors began reporting false data. Communication channels were hacked. Their own security drones started behaving erratically. The Threxian delegation had been compromised, but instead of retreating in fear, they doubled down, deploying their diplomatic envoy directly into the heart of humanity's most powerful nations. The real breakthrough, however, came when humanity's military response shifted from reactive to proactive. The world's leaders quickly agreed that the Threxian vessels posed a threat, and military assets were mobilized. Earth's forces were not as advanced as the Threxians, but humans had one thing the Threxians did not anticipate: an overwhelming will to resist. A network of coordinated attacks began. Fighter jets, adapted with reverse-engineered alien technology, took off from military bases across the globe. The human pilots, using Threxian tech integrated into their own aircraft, breached the outer shields of one of the visiting ships. It wasn't a massive success, but it was enough. The message was clear: humanity had the potential to defend itself. And then came the reports: a small, isolated Threxian ship that had gone off course, crash landing in the Siberian wilderness. For weeks, the wreckage was studied by military teams who used human ingenuity to extract critical technology and data from the broken craft. The Threxians had underestimated the power of human reverse engineering. Meanwhile, the Threxian Council reevaluated their strategy. The sudden surge of human resistance was not something they could easily ignore. With a mix of frustration and awe, the Threxians realized that the human potential was much greater than they'd ever expected. They had to change their approach. The goal was no longer just containment. The human race was too dangerous now, too adaptable. It had become clear that Earth was not just another insignificant backwater planet. The Threxian delegation had miscalculated. Instead of being subdued by a show of force, humanity had risen with creativity and determination. In their attempts to isolate and study, the Threxians had overlooked a simple truth: humans are most dangerous when they have something to prove. The Threxians made the decision to escalate. Their fleet, which had initially been on standby, now advanced. The ships glided silently through space, arriving in Earth's orbit with weapons primed and ready. The Threxians knew they could overpower Earth's military in a heartbeat. But the question they faced now was whether the humans would just fight, or whether they would find a way to turn this into something bigger. The Threxian Council sent another directive to their field operatives: engage humanity in direct contact. Initiate the next phase. We will offer them a choice: join us or face extinction. The stakes were now higher than ever. Humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future, a future they knew they would have to shape with their own hands, their own ideas, and their own weapons. Earth's greatest asset, it seemed, wasn't their weaponry or their technology, but the unyielding drive to innovate. The Threxians had miscalculated, believing that their advanced technology would be enough to dominate. But humanity had a power the Threxians could never fully understand: the ability to adapt, to evolve, and to create from almost nothing. As the Threxian fleet neared Earth, humanity prepared for the next stage. No longer simply reacting, no longer just defending. This was their chance to make a stand, not with brute force, but with the power of invention, of creation, of the singular human spirit. The war for Earth's future had only just begun. With tensions mounting, the question now remained: would the Threxians learn to respect humanity's ingenuity, or would they face a force of creation that could turn even the smallest object into a weapon of unimaginable power? This concludes Section 4, The Rising Threat. Would you like to explore further ideas or expand upon any part of the story?